Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment on the Weekend Show brought to you by Holy Crunch Popcorn. Hello, Didi.
Hi, Andy.
How have you been? What have you been up to?
I've been good. Good morning. I've been up to work and rest.
You've actually been busy working.
True.
I can tell because I know. On my own part, I was away for a couple of weeks. I went for a U.S. Department of State exchange program called the International Visitor Citizenship Program on NGO management. So that was interesting, but a lot of work. And so it's good to be back.
Did you
to the
enjoy
weekend.
it?
You know what? I always like traveling, so any excuse to travel
Oh,
works.
yeah.
And it was the US and a couple of states, but I did get to learn a lot about running non-profits,
Okay.
which has been helpful. Talking about non-profits and our finances, coming back to fuel prices still being high. How have
And the
you been
queue's
coping?
back.
The queues are back.
Yeah, the queues are back. It's quite unfortunate because we're buying fuel at NNPC is selling at 617. So that's a lot. And then there are now queues added to that. So it's crazy. High fuel prices, then you have to queue for us to still get the fuel that you're paying at those that crazy amount. Some other filling stations are selling for about 641.
And
I'm
sometimes it's
understanding what's the
650.
regulation? There's no regulation in it, and it's really sad, unfortunately.
I mean, I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about that on our political segment, but talking about fuel prices and transportation, maybe it's time for us to start riding bikes.
Oh, absolutely. We need like bike lanes around the different cities in the country, and we need to start riding bikes and reduce, carbon emissions. So it also helps us.
Especially about carbon emissions. I don't understand why it's still raining in Nigeria in December.
You know what? Last Saturday in particular, the rain in Abuja was really
Oh,
heavy. I didn't even know it was raining
yes.
because I was indoors. I had an appointment. So when I came out, I could not believe what I was seeing. I had to look at my calendar. And it was November, and it's supposed to be the dry season here in Nigeria. I call it Nigerian summer, and unfortunately, it's raining. So climate change is really getting to us here.
You know, I should apologize to Ogashio who launched a book on Saturday, and I really wanted to go for it, but because of the rain, I
Yeah.
looked out and I was like, yeah. And talking about rain, transportation, and bicycle, we have a professional in the studio who's
Yes.
been here to talk to us about cycling before. And on 26th of November, it was the UN World Sustainable Transportation Day, and so I would like to learn about alternatives. So joining us today,
We have Engineer Emmanuel John, who is the Executive Director of Oceanwell Mobility. Good morning and welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
we didn't forget you. I've not seen them in about 4 weeks, and so it's good to be back. And it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
Last time you were talking to us about cycling.
Yeah.
Let's talk about sustainable transport. You just heard what we were saying.
Thank you very much. Obviously, the realities of climate change are here with us. Usually in Abuja, rain stops around mid-September. But we are in December, and it's still threatening to rain, which shows the fact that the climate change effects are here with us. And it's across Nigeria, it's across Africa, it's across the world. The reason is very simple. We have built systems and programs that have not taken care of the earth, and the impact is coming back to us. Currently, COP28 is on, where climate change issues are in the front burner across the world in Dubai. Our leaders from Nigeria are there. And I remember that the president of Nigeria, then President Muhammadu Buhari, was in COP26, where he lined up the plan of action for Nigeria for attaining Vision Zero on sustainable environment. Somehow we are nowhere near it, and that is why it has become very pertinent that the declaration of the UN General Assembly of 26th of November every year is properly given attention in Nigeria as World Sustainable Transport Day. And so it becomes important because in the declaration, the UN General Assembly made it very clear that it is now high time to pay careful attention and invest in sustainable transport, otherwise we are nowhere near realizing the goals, the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. I heard the Executive Director of UN Habitat speaking recently, and he said, if the transport component of the SDGs are not addressed, we will never realize the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay. So what impact does this day that, was celebrated on 26th of November have to not just Nigeria, but the world at large?
Okay. Let me again give some slight background. We've had 5 different UN resolutions relating to sustainable transport in the past 6-7 years. The most recent, which is this one, which came in May, was because in spite of these resolutions, there has not been a focal attention to developing sustainable transport to the extent that it will help in addressing the transport component of the SDGs. And so the resolution becomes important to declare an entire day and say this day, every attention should be focused on sustainable transport. And so the impact will be very huge if we pay attention, because of course, a declaration is a declaration until we go into action. And so we as NGOs, as private sector, as individuals, as academics, want to stay on government, stay on all the stakeholders, and ensure that we go into action. And so the day is very significant because we are nowhere near sustainable transport development in our climate.
So you have the naysayers who tell you climate change is a scam. And we've also seen the global trajectory where there's always some hot topic. Yeah. And so I remember global warming, then climate change generally, sustainable energy. Now they're talking about blue economy.
Yeah.
What's the real impact? What potential threats will we face if we don't fix sustainable transportation?
Thank you very much. Now, in the greenhouse gas emissions globally, transport is the second largest chunk emitter of the gases. After electricity and heat, the next largest chunk is transport. When you come to CO2 in particular, which is the biggest of the gases, transport again is the largest chunk. Elsewhere, electricity, but then if you come to Africa and particularly Nigeria, you know that electricity is not likely going to be the highest, the biggest. The reason is because if you go to places like Germany, 2 coal generating plants, electricity generating plants, are sufficient to take care of all the industries in Nigeria in terms of equating the emissions of CO2 from them. So our largest, in quote, emitter of CO2 is transport. Because we are a developing country that depends on used vehicle with limited maintenance culture, with so much vehicular growth without limits. I was told, I saw in the data from UN Habitat that 80% of all vehicles imported to Benin Republic are coming to Nigeria. 70% of the same in Togo is coming to Nigeria because this is the destination for vehicles. 75% of registered vehicles in West Africa are in Nigeria. Now again, where are those vehicles concentrated? In cities. And so the impact is huge if we do nothing about sustainable transport, because sustainable transport simply means a shift from where we are to where we ought to be. And perhaps time will permit us to analyze what constitutes this sustainable transport system.
Okay, I would like to know, based on what you just said, what regulations can be put in place now in order to help address these environmental challenges such as carbon emission, as you just stated?
Thank you very much. Incidentally, we have a climate change policy in Nigeria. We also have the NDCs, the national, and the NDCs, the national, I've forgotten the details of that, which catalyzes the content of our contribution to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Incidentally, all of the strategic initiatives there, the only one focused on transport is rail development. Rail development, which is good. But then, rail that is interstate, intercity, does not address the massive vehicular volume in cities. And so, even though we have a policy, we have the NDCs and all of the strategic initiatives to achieve that, which the president of Nigeria reeled out in COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, it goes beyond having those, because our main concern from the perspective of these emissions is transport. And we do not have, sustainable strategy for transforming our transport system as it is. Because there are three key areas of transport that constitute the sustainable transport system that we're talking about. Number one is public transport development, which is high-capacity vehicles. I remember after the removal of the fuel subsidy, the president of the federal government announced that there was going to be an intervention to transport, and they were going to bring in buses. The first they mentioned was 18-seater, 20-seater buses. I said, no, why would you do that? So a committee was constituted. I remember publishing an article, and the committee was constituted. I was invited in. And we said you cannot buy 18-seater bus in 2023 to do sustainable transport. No. You must buy high-capacity vehicles, 63 passengers and above. Anything less than that is not sustainable. And so public transport development that is focused on high-capacity buses, that is focused on light rail in cities, is number one. Number two is non-motorized transport, which talks about promoting walking and cycling in cities, which means you need to invest, fund walking and cycling to make it desirable mode of transport for everyone within the city. And that means we should have bicycle lanes where the speed of vehicles are high and there is high population of vehicle. And then we should have lanes for walking, lanes for cycling in every part of the city. Once you have that, people will will leave driving and ride their bicycles. But it doesn't stop on that. Promoting sustainable transport in terms of NMT, non-motorized transport, also means that you make the car expensive to own. It is not enough to create bicycle lanes. It's not enough to paint the road in colors. It's not enough to produce public transport. As long as car is subsidized and car is available and people can afford it, it will be a fight between NMT, between public transport and car centricity, which is what we are fighting against.
I think apart from the prices of the car, I believe, like in England, for example, putting a tax on carbon emission is actually...
That's one thing.
Yeah.
Let's say this, you buy fuel for, how much you say? It's
617.
17 naira.
Yeah.
We add 100 naira additional
For tax.
as your tax for choosing to pollute the air. Elsewhere, everywhere you park, I gave example the other time in Shanghai when it became so bad in terms of congestion. They created a policy, that was in 2013, where you can buy a car for 100,000 and you need 1 million to register it. And then the number of plate numbers available to pick in a month was 45, which means you can stay in the queue for 6 months. And that 45 is open bidding, which means the highest bidder takes it. And so for 6 months, you can buy a car, you can't register it. And because you can't register, you can't put it on the road. And then you go everywhere, you park, you pay. And because of that, within 3 months, cars dropped in the city dramatically. And
so just to reel this in, I like your suggestion. I don't agree with it. I like your suggestion. I don't agree with it because we know how expensive things are in Nigeria. We're dealing with food inflation, fuel price, now inflation. A good alternative, which I think is in Norway or Sweden, where they now have a high number of electric vehicles because government has subsidized the electric vehicles. Yes, power supply is quite a problem, but also in Germany, the president has extended the Siemens deal, and power supply has been reasonably better. I can speak for Abuja, so it may be from a place of privilege, but also electric vehicles, subsidizing that, and maybe agreeing with you, putting a premium on fuel-driven motors could work, but don't you think getting partnerships with the EVs
Yeah.
into Nigeria and subsidizing those so that people can make that switch, wouldn't that be more sustainable?
Thank you. You know, I mentioned that there are three focal points of
Yes.
sustainable transport. I mentioned public transport. I was discussing NMT. The third area is where you are speaking,
Please.
which is the need for alternative fuel, the need for electrification and digitization, the need for technology applications and general ITS management that enhances the efficiency of the vehicle, reduces emission. And so electrification is key, for instance. But like I said, we need to first of all discourage the car-centric mindset. And then the few who chooses to use the car should electrify it or use alternative fuel, which is why the federal government is talking about CNG, because it emits lesser volume of gases, even though it doesn't totally eliminate it. But at least it reduces the quantity that goes out into the atmosphere. So we could have electrification of vehicles, partnerships and collaborations with the different actors in the industry. I remember the founder of Silverbird, Benmure Bruce had sent a bill to the National Assembly one time, and they threw it out on account of the fact that we are a crude, we are an oil country, and that if we decide to go electric, who will use our fuel? And I said, that was very, very archaic in thinking, because this is the direction of the world.
I agree with you. Unfortunately, because of time, we'll have to end it here. Otherwise, we'll keep on talking. But I have a final word to government officials. What are you doing with convoys of 7 to 10 cars? And what's this thing about someone coming to open the door for someone who's going to open the door for who is going to come out of the car? We need to do better across board, and part of it is cutting the cost of governance, which could include cutting the number of cars in your convoy. We're having rains in December, and it's not normal. Climate change is real. We need to have sustainable transportation alternatives. That's all we can take on the lifestyle segment. We'll take a quick break. When we return, more on The Weekend Show.